Jimmy Butler was back in the lineup, and that was all the Heat needed to blow out the Knicks in Game 3, a total effort from Miami. The Knicks never led at any point in the game, and they now take a 2-1 lead in the series. I break down Jimmy Butler's return, how the Heat locked up New York scorers, and we answer your questions in today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We're recording this after the Heat blew out the Knicks in Miami. They held the Knicks to just 86 points. Jimmy Butler returned from his sprained right ankle and set the tone right away. The Heat take a 2-1 lead in the series. They're now 2 wins away from returning to the conference finals. David, were you surprised by how easily the Heat won this game?
I am. I thought there was going to be a little bit, not necessarily a lack of energy. I didn't think it was going to be this much of a force. Like, that they were going to try to welcome Jimmy back, but his status was so up in the air. Of course, we didn't get any kind of clear notification. The expectation was that he'd return, and then we didn't hear anything until shortly before tip-off, and we didn't know exactly at what level he'd return, whether or not we'd see the playoff Jimmy that we've seen throughout this postseason, or even like a much lesser shade of that version. Instead, he was engaged early on. He was scoring 10 quick points in the first quarter. I think he scored 2 of the first 3 baskets to kind of set the tone early on. They led with their defense. They provided this incredible energy. I thought, really, I was watching both teams, and I know pregame shoot-around doesn't necessarily mean anything. The Knicks were nailing every shot, whether it was Derrick Rose, who doesn't even play, Isaiah Hartenstein knocking down three-pointers. Conversely, Miami seemed a little tight. Max Strus, Duncan, everybody missing all their shots. I'm thinking to myself, is this a sign of things to come? It was the exact opposite. It was just a complete flip switch, and it was unbelievable. Miami went into that first quarter super engaged, controlling the energy, the pace. They never let go. Again, the fact that they were able to keep New York from ever leading in this game speaks incredible volumes early on, throughout the game, even late in the fourth quarter when the lead was cut down to 10 and never felt particularly close. This was a huge surprise and incredible win for Miami.
I use the word cruised specifically because it really did feel like that, right? And by halftime, you kind of felt like this thing was going to be over. Maybe the Knicks made like a 10-0 run or something to really make it close, but I was like, no, the Heat were controlling this game. That's interesting, that detail you mentioned about the pregame kind of warm-ups there, because you hear stories like that all the time, right? I think it was Klay Thompson before that Game 6 against OKC where he just went off with all those 3-pointers, and like the story goes, like he was missing everything in that morning's shoot around. He's like, I don't think I have it today. And then you come out, and Game 6 Klay has sort of become a thing, right? Because he's a gamer. Well, the Heat are gamers, right? And that's sort of what defines this Heat team is, terrible regular season, incredibly frustrating regular season, up and down all the time. They almost lose in the play-in. They do lose the first game in the play-in tournament. They're almost watching the playoffs from home, and they get in, and all of a sudden they're like, all right, I guess it's go time now. And it kind of is. So it's an interesting detail that you mentioned that, because there's something about this team that, especially with Jimmy Butler in the lineup, they have this unbelievable amount of confidence. And I don't really know where I was asked on a radio show the other day, like, hey, where's this coming from? And maybe there is something to the whole idea of the playoffs are starting. Everybody is 0-0 record-wise. Shooting percentages are reset. Everything is reset. And I think this Heat team really needed it. When it comes down to the three-point shooting, defense, rebounding, whatever it is, I think there is a mental thing. Let's just take the three-point shooting, for instance. Like, it's so mental, right? Like, you and I talk about, like, the three-point shooting being such a mental thing. And so maybe it would make sense then that if you kind of get this, like, artificial reset to your season, because it's not a real reset. It's still the same season. If you kind of get this artificial thing, maybe that's just what you need, that weird, like, little mental gymnastic leap that you need to just sort of be like, oh, you know what? I can actually hit threes again. And this is sort of carried through for the entire Heat team. I don't really mean to talk about the three-pointers that much because they were only 7 of 32 tonight. But the Knicks were even worse. And 104 I want to talk about the defense. 104 possessions for the Knicks. They score 86 points. That is awful. That is like the worst offense of all time. And yes, the Knicks missed some threes for sure. They missed some threes in game one, and I get it. But I thought the Heat's defense was so good from the tip. I thought Bam Adebayo was awesome. I thought everybody was super physical. And in practice this week, leading into this game, they kept talking about, hey, we need to match the physicality. We didn't feel like we did that in game two. We got to do that in game three. I thought they were there. I was so impressed with what the Heat did defensively. What stood out to you there?
Yeah, that was the buzzword from Eric Spoelstra's post-game press conference was physicality, and he was using it specifically about Bam Adebayo. And I think it kind of built off of Bam's initial performance on Julius Randle. I know he got coked a couple of times in game two by Randle, and it's not to say that Randle, isn't a great player by any stretch, and yet Bam was able to lock him up early and often. And from that point forward, Miami kind of just said, you know what, we're going to continue to build off this. They made a few key adjustments throughout the game. Jimmy playing a little bit more off ball, not allowing those passes. Because remember, we talked about Randle as a playmaker, with Jimmy a little bit more as a rover, kind of shading off of Josh Hart or whoever he was on in the particular, in terms of whoever he was specifically assigned to. He was able to play off a little bit more, work more in terms of closeouts, and again, put a hand up, force turnovers, things of that sort. Never got comfortable. Randle never got comfortable. Only held at 10 points? And
4 of 15 shooting.
Yeah, he was
4 turnovers. He was terrible. It was a terrible
Yeah.
Julius Randle game. And I know that he's still like a little hobbled and stuff, but he was good in game two and he was still hobbled. So
no, that was not shades of injury there. I mean, he was a little, he was definitely, he was.
Miami's game plan for the first 3 games, in terms, like you mentioned, the X's and O's, and I agree with you. I think the goal in the first 3 games was the same, even if the execution was a little bit different. Was let's limit Jalen Brunson, let's limit Julius Randle, let's make sure Emmanuel Quickley doesn't go off. And Emmanuel Quickley, tough fall for him in the fourth quarter. Was that the beginning of the fourth quarter? And I guess he ends up having a sprained knee or whatever it is. But
is that what it was? I couldn't tell, and I didn't hear anything.
It was an ankle or a knee. Yeah, Fred Katz tweeted it about what Tibbs said. So it's a similar thing to what happened to Jimmy. They're going to evaluate it tomorrow. But the goal for Miami this whole time was, all right, let's just shut the water off on Jalen Brunson. Let's shut the water off from Julius Randle. And just if Josh Hart and these other guys just nail a bunch of threes, then so be it, right? But that's going to be what our game plan is. And they did it in game one, sort of. They didn't really get to it in game two, and you could say that Jimmy Butler wasn't in there and they had to play so much zone, and they didn't want to really do that, but they had to because Jimmy Butler wasn't in the game. They get Jimmy back, and then you get back right to it. We mentioned Julius Randle. Terrible game for him. Jalen Brunson wasn't all that effective. 20 points, missed all 5 of his 3-pointers. Very reminiscent of game one, where he missed all 6 of his 3-pointers in that first game of the series, and he wasn't that great overall either. So
with Brunson, good point by him, because I think it was exactly right. Like, he started cooking a little bit in the first quarter, going ISO specific on Gabe Vincent, who he can't really handle that matchup. It's not that Vincent doesn't try. He's very physical, did an amazing job, who we'll talk about a little bit later, fighting through and under screens and things of that sort. But Brunson was ISOing on him. They were clearing the floor, so it was all 4 Knicks players drawing defenders away from Brunson, and he was able to attack on the wing, and he was just going against Vincent. He did it twice in a row. Spo immediately calls a timeout, puts in Kyle Lowry and Caleb Martins, and I thought that was a brilliant strategy from him, because immediately from that point forward, they did a much better job of containing Brunson. He wasn't able to attack anybody in particular as effectively as he had been against Vincent. Vincent's a little undersized going against a guy as physical as Brunson, and it looked like that was pretty clear early on, but he made the change, and then from that point forward, look, they adapted very, very well defensively. They executed their game plan as well as we've ever seen them. The fact that they were able to win as comfortably as they did, shooting as badly as they did from 3-point range, was absolutely incredible. And they were the better team by far.
They were the more physical team. They executed better. They were better coached. They had the better game plan. It just feels like the Knicks, I don't want to say they're out of moves, because I don't know, right? We're only 3 games in. But it kind of feels like they might be out of moves. Like,
what's their next adjustment? Exactly.
It's just play better, right? And sometimes that is the best adjustment, and play more physical and stuff. Like, can they get something out of Mitchell Robinson, who I guess
make her miss league?
Alex Wolf was telling us the other day, like, maybe he's dealing with some injury stuff, and that's obviously impacting him, if that's true. Yeah, and so, like, I don't really know where the Knicks go, especially if Jimmy Butler did roll his ankle again late in this game, and he was hobbled for a couple of possessions. He was kind of doing that thing where he goes to the corner.
According to Spo, it was a thigh. It was more of a thigh. Apparently he bumped into the stanchion at one point, and it didn't really hurt. And he said,
I saw the replay. It kind of looked like his ankle, but you never really know. But yeah, whatever it is.
Look, I was in the back.
It was a little weird, and then he was moving fine afterwards. So I'm really not that concerned about it.
I was in the back going towards the media interview room. You're familiar with this, but for our fans and listeners that aren't familiar with it, I was walking back, and Jimmy was heading into the locker room. Well, he had some choice words to say about the Knicks and about his status overall.
What did he say?
Fine. I can't use it on the show, but
was it antagonist, confident? Okay, give me the tone. What's the tone?
I am the best effing player in the world. Said double teams, triple teams, it don't effing matter. How about that?
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
That's an amazing detail. I'm the best effing player in the world. Double teams, triple teams, it doesn't effing matter.
Yeah, I don't know if it was tongue in cheek with Jimmy. You never really could tell, but tonight it kind of looked it. I mean, 28 points.
Shades of Tobias Harris over me.
Right. I was the only one who caught it. Luckily for me, it was me, Bernie Lee, his agent, and that's about it. As he was walking towards the locker room.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're gonna clip that and post it on social. Credit cookies. Should we do it? Before we get to credit cookies, real quick. The Heat, the broadcast had this actually. The Heat are 2 games away now from being the second 8th seed of all time to make it to the conference finals. That's an unbelievable stat, and I'll just leave it there. I'll leave it there. Let's go to credit.
Well, we know who the first 8th seed was. Unfortunately, it was the New York Knicks against this very same Miami Heat.
But in a weird lockout year, like this is a real basketball season. So you could even say like the first 8th seed ever in a basketball season that wasn't impacted by a lockout and shortened.
A full 82 game regular season. This is the first 8th seed. Well, not even technically the 8th seed either. Though that's some Knicks fan will come up and say, "No, the 8th seed." Yeah,
right, because of the play-in tournament. So it's all very weird. Whatever. Either way, they are 2 games away from returning to the conference finals. And if Jimmy Butler is playing like the best effing player in the world, who knows what's going to happen at that point? But before we move on from that, let's get to credit cookies because there's so many that we want to hand out. We've got 10 of them. Jimmy Butler, 28 points, 9 of 21 shooting overall. He got to the line 11 times, made 10 of those free throws, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and really like a lot of that other box score stuff outside the points happened in the first half. He just set the tone right away. I think when we start with credit cookies, we got to start with Jimmy Butler. 3 or 4 makes sense. So you could give him more, but there's just so many other players that we want to get to.
I was just thinking that's like if in a vacuum I would just look at his playoff performance, you could say 6 maybe, as high as 6, but it's got to be 4 just because everybody else stepped up to some degree. So we'll hold it at 4, and that's almost doing a disservice. We might have to go to a baker's dozen today just because everybody deserves some credit today because I think there was I want
to talk about Kyle Lowry right away. He was unbelievable. 14 points on 9 shots, 4 assists. It doesn't like blow you away, but it's just the Kyle Lowry stuff that you and I always talk about. It's like those little in-between things, defending the right player at the right time. We talk about New York only scoring 86 points on 104 possessions. Kyle Lowry was a really big part of that. How many minutes did he end up playing today? 25 minutes? Yeah, it was like 25 really impactful minutes, though. It's like you really are starting to feel his presence in a way that I really didn't like feel it all the time in the regular season.
He was hurt. This was such a much better version of him. And I keep saying, like, the plan was this, to rest him during the regular season, even as there was all this rampant speculation about him never playing in Miami again and being held out. And this is it. His tenure in Miami was effectively done. It was about sitting him down, getting him rested, getting him healthy to the point where he could be as effective as he is from his scoring, his defense, and his IQ and his savvy. There was one particular play where he just robbed the ball straight up from Julius Randle. May have been a little excessive contact there, but it was so effective. Like, it was in the midst of like New York with their comeback run, and all of a sudden Kyle just comes up right behind, sneaking behind Julius Randle, who had no idea.
He must be so annoying to play against. Like I want to go back to I love the word you used earlier, rattled, because it's specific to Julius Randle. And I think Lowry was a big part of that because you're just like, what is with this guy? He's always around. And I feel like by the second quarter, Julius Randle was like, all right, where's Kyle Lowry? Is he going to be annoying me again? Like, that's kind of how it felt. So Lowry was a big part of that. 2 credit cookies to him.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
So now we have we're about like 5?
6. That's 6. 4 for Jimmy, 2 for Kyle. We're at 6. We got to give 3 to Bam Adebayo. Hearing the criticism after game 1, and I know there's been so much talk about he needs to score more, and I've kind of defended him to the point where I was getting criticized for defending him as much, but he showed such incredible aggression. There were moments there. Like, I have to say, I am so proud of this home fan base because they recognize Bam's effort in a way that I've rarely seen over the course of the season. Like the little things he was doing, hustling for rebounds, challenging Randall, Hartenstein, Robinson, whoever was out there. He was just towering over them with his physicality, his presence, his energy was so just infectious. He was just a real factor out there, getting all these key points, attacking the basket early. He got the first basket of the game for Miami. It was just a really, really great game for Bam Adebayo, and I'm glad that it comes on the heels of what many people thought was one of his worst games, particularly in the postseason. But really, really great game.
17 points and 12 rebounds for him. He got to the line for 4 free throws. I'm with you, and I love that detail about the fans kind of egging him on and being there for him. It's a smart fan base. It's a fan base that has shown up throughout the playoffs, and I think if you want, we can even give a credit cookie to the Kaseya Center fans if you want, but. Max
a lot
Strus,
less Knicks fans than I thought. Too many, and still less than I thought there would be. They all left.
Wasn't a lot to cheer for Knicks fans. Ooh.
They left early. By halftime, they were sitting around like they had no idea, shell shocked. And then by the midway through the fourth quarter, they were almost gone. Like there were pockets throughout the arena, and they were completely empty. It was nothing but a mass of white shirts with all that blue to make it ugly.
So our friend over. At the New York Daily News, Stephen Bondi, who had some choice words for the Heat fans in the first game. I think he's been in every post game recap that he's doing. He has some sort of dig, some jab at Heat fans. What was it today? He goes, here, I got it. This is great radio. The Miami crowd is famously fickle, and it arrived fashionably late Saturday, but the large pockets of Knicks fans were drowned out early because of the loudspeakers and the team's slow start. So he's throwing stuff at loudspeakers. He's like, it wasn't really the
artificial
loudspeakers. Or come on. Like, just Stephen Bondi, you're banned from the show. All right. Max Strus.
Talk about Max Strus.
In terms of just needing some shot making, he was 7 of 14 overall, 3 of 10 from 3-point range. So it wasn't great, but he was a lot better than I think everybody else on the Heat. Like Lowry was 2 of 4, he was good, but outside of that, like nobody else had it going. Kevin Love was 0 for 3, Jimmy Butler was 0 for 2, Gabe was 0 for 4, Duncan Robinson was 1 for 5. So they needed Caleb was 0 for 3. So they needed somebody to just make some shots, even if it wasn't at a super high percentage where you'd like it. But Max coming out and even just hitting 30% on 10 3-pointer attempts and just letting it fly. Just taking those 10 threes. I mean, the Heat took 30 of them, 32 overall, and he was responsible for 10 of those. So I just thought his presence and just willingness to keep shooting was super important. And then defensively, I thought he was pretty good tonight too, and he ended up with 19 points. So a good game for Max Strus.
I'm glad you mentioned the defense because it was very, again, physical. The physicality level is something that was required of the series in a way that it wasn't necessarily against the Milwaukee Bucks, or maybe slightly more of a finesse team, and they can beat you in so many different ways. With New York, it's all about imposing their will, using the physicality of Randall and Brunson to get to their spots. Miami has found a way within the course of the series to adjust and match that level and surpass it. And that's been very impressive. For a guy like Max Strus, who's been questioned and criticized for his lack of defense in the past, he was really owned up to it. And the fact that he provided such crucial scoring in the first and third quarter, absolutely huge. Great game.
And then caught an outlet pass from Kevin Love and dunked it.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
And then I think he was surprised he dunked it because he kind of like wobbled afterwards and fell backwards.
He lost his balance. That's right.
Cool moment for Max Strus. So those are the credit cookies that we have. I think that's it. Unless you have any other notes from the show.
Shout out to Haywood Highsmith, who provided some good minutes there. Caleb Martin, I think he's still laboring from injury. I didn't get a chance to ask Spoelstra about it after the game.
Got into it a little bit with Isaiah Hartenstein. We had almost a Heat Knicks moment. It was more of like a hold me back kind of Heat Knicks moment. Nobody grabbing legs and begging for forgiveness. But
Cody Zeller was really good. I think he had, Bo talked about in post game, just bringing his size, being able to match again that physicality. Kind of a couple of dunks, especially one in early and then one late in the game that really set the tone as well. So just a really, really good overall effort from this Heat team, who we weren't sure how they were going to respond in Game 3. I mean, we didn't think. After Game 2, I said I wasn't necessarily scared of these New York Knicks. I think they threw their best punch in Game 2 without Jimmy Butler and getting some beneficial officiating calls in their favor. That wasn't the case today. Miami responded. They set the tone. They controlled the game completely. I don't know. I don't know what to expect in Game 4, but my thought process is Miami has pretty much gotten a stranglehold on the series. I'm curious to see what adjustments New York can make, if any.
That's how I feel. I thought the Knicks really got to their game plan in game 2, and then they got taken out of that game plan. And like I said, I don't really know what the next thing, the next level, the next layer for the Knicks is. And with the Heat, you mentioned like how do they respond after game 2? In the regular season, they lose a game like they did in game 2, and that could lead to a 3-game losing streak.
Easily.
And that's, you know what I mean? And it's just the mentality shift for this team, the level of confidence that they have, it's completely different. And I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. It's Eric Spoelstra, it's Jimmy Butler, it's Bam Adebayo, Udonis Haslem, so on. It's the Miami Heat, right? Like, this is why people are scared of the Miami Heat. It's why every national talking head says nobody wants to play the Heat in the first round, right? It's just sort of the due respect that they get. But
at the same time, everybody predicted a sweep from Milwaukee too. So you can't have it both ways. But
I guess. So. But it's like, but again, like I don't blame anybody for picking the Bucks. They were the 1 seed, and so we picked the Bucks. Like it was the obvious choice, and yet here are the Miami Heat, 2 games away from making it back to the conference finals. We will be back Monday. The Knicks and the Heat play game 4 Monday night. And so, where to find us. YouTube, Odyssey, your favorite podcast app. Make sure that you are subscribed if you're watching on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to the show, follow us there as well. In the meantime, that's it. Thanks for joining me, David.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Let's go Heat.